Alright, so 5.5 weeks out from the WBFF Australian Pro-Am, and I thought I would take the opportunity to invite fellow EHP Labs brethren, sponsored athlete Zach Perner. I've personally flown him up from Melbourne because I need all the help I can get with 5.5 weeks to go. Calories have dropped, therefore my energy levels have dropped, which makes having 3 scoops of this an absolute necessity. Today we are going through a Deltoid Demolition workout. We're going to be filming it live on Facebook for the EHP Labs Facebook page, answering questions for all our friends and followers within the EHP Labs family. I'm going to let Zach effectively lead the way today because my brain capacity is at an all-time low. So I was going to let you lead, but okay. All right, well, I guess I'm leading. But we're going to get into it. We're going to pump out a nice Delt session. I know that I need to be working on my deltoids, as I've mentioned before. Let's get into it.
I'm excited. Let's do it.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are around the world, to my fitness fraternity, sending you positive vibes and energy here on a wonderful Wednesday afternoon in sensational Sydney, Australia.
Now is the time. Don't try to hide, 'cause I'm gonna harm you like an animal. I know you thought it was over. I know you thought it was finished. I know you think I'm a cynic, but you know this shit only business. People like
Perfect. Teamwork makes the dream work. So the first priority when we are setting up for a standing barbell military press, we want to make sure that effectively the bar is in line with our shoulders in terms of the height. And the reason for that is we just want to make it a seamless unrack. So when we're in this position, it's just seamless. We're not overreaching to try and bring it off the rack. So from here, going with part tight, and then walking back. So I think that's a pretty good height. And Zach and I, fortunately, Zach and I are both manlets, which means that we don't necessarily have to watch out for height.
Legal hobbits, if you will.
Yeah, legal hobbits,
yeah.
Which is to our benefit that we are training together and we don't have to adjust the rack at all.
How's your strength level since calories are going down?
Oh, don't ask. You'll find out. All right, so we're currently warming up with standing barbell military press, using lighter loads to begin with before progressively increasing the loads into our working weight. You can interchange or substitute your barbell military press with dumbbell shoulder press. These pressing exercises, these compound pressing exercises, they form the foundation of a lot of my shoulder routines. Just giving you a behind the scenes right now. We're doing a Facebook Live segment and Zach's just going through and explaining the rationale behind our warm-up sets. So there are many ways in which you can consume your BCAA's intra-workout. Some people prefer obviously mixing their Beyond BCAA with water. I choose a less conventional route, but...
Always with the easy route, Robbie. This is disgusting. Does it taste right, Luke? Mm-hmm.
Certainly feeling it this week. Look, at the moment, looking at all the ratings that I usually give each week, I'd say energy levels are probably sitting at around a 3, 2 to 3. I've gotten rather aggressive with my calorie approach this week, and as a result my energy levels have significantly dropped, and my performance in the gym has probably dropped a little bit, but it's to be expected. Around 5.5 weeks out, just taking a little bit more of an aggressive approach so that I can make sure that I get into condition earlier, ideally 2 weeks earlier, just so that I can avoid any unnecessary stress in the lead up to show day. Probably say hunger levels 3, starting to feel a little bit more hungry every day, and I'm starting to get cravings where I normally wouldn't normally get those sort of cravings, but I tend to find myself now strategically partitioning the majority of my calories towards the back end of the day as a means of managing hunger, and as a means of just ensuring I'm compliant with my diet. I know that I'm going to crave calories towards the back end of the day, so it makes sense to place the majority of them there, whereas at the beginning of the day I can probably afford to be a little less full. So high protein, high fat in the morning, and then the majority of my carbohydrates towards the back end of the day. And I usually train during the evening, so it sort of makes sense from a performance and a recovery perspective to have the majority of my carbohydrates there at the back end. So just managing those little things that happen with comp prep and surviving. So moving into seated dumbbell lateral raises after doing our standing barbell military press there. I'm really focusing on the lateral deltoids. I know I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that I'm really looking to focus all my attention towards bringing up my shoulders and my chest. So I'm doing around 4 to 5 sets here on lateral raises. Doing it in that seated position means that I'm avoiding the temptation to effectively do a standing calf raise as I bring the weight up. It's more a discipline thing, especially when I'm under fatigue, to avoid the temptation of using momentum. I'll perform this exercise in a seated position. Just looking to, as I bring the dumbbell up, ensure that my elbow is higher than my wrist at all time, and if necessary, pouring the milk out to get that lateral deltoid popping, making sure that the lateral deltoid is facing the ceiling, not tension through the anterior deltoid. Slight variations in angle can emphasize different muscles as you perform the same movement. So just being conscious of angles, wrist position, it's very important. So moving into single arm cable lateral raise, performing this exercise with the cable behind our back. I find that by performing behind my back or between my legs, I'm actually able to engage the lateral deltoid a little bit better than the temptation of using my anterior deltoid as I raise up. So it's just a slight variation, and it just ensures that the tension is placed on the target muscle that I want to emphasize. Using relatively light loads here, high repetition, looking to pump as much blood as we possibly can into the lateral deltoid. So I'm looking at around 15 reps each side. Again, the same principles apply with a cable lateral raise that a dumbbell lateral raise in terms of leading with the elbows, squeezing at the top, control on the way down, and trying to minimize the amount of momentum that's used. So if you feel as though you're hauling the cable up with too much momentum and you're not properly engaging the lateral deltoid head, it's probably going to be in your best interest to lighten the load, check your ego at the door, and emphasize tension on the target muscle that you really want to recruit. Now there are times where I actually don't want to use a cable attachment on the handle. And the reason for that is because I feel as though I can dictate the range of motion and the grip variation with my wrist by not having that cable attached, or the handle attached to the cable. So by not having that cable attachment, I'm actually able to dictate where the thumb, you'll notice as I come up, my thumb is going to be pointed down at a 45-degree angle so that I can place that tension in the lateral deltoid head.
Is it okay to mix OXYSHRED with protein?
Why on earth would you want to do that? That is disgusting.
Yeah, but is it okay, Robbie?
It's fine, but it's completely safe. It's just that the texture, most of any of the whey protein supplements that we have at EHP are sort of got that dairy taste to it, you know what I mean? Like it's vanilla, it's chopped peanut butter. That doesn't mix well with like mango or passion fruit. You have to be some weird individual to like that. All right, so we're finishing up this Deltoid Demolition workout with a rear delt superset. Doing standing reverse cable flies and then immediately moving into a seated rope face pull. So one of the key things is to choose a light load for both exercises. The rear delts are a relatively small muscle group. There's no need to use excessive amounts of weight unless the muscle can actually use that weight in isolation. This is an isolation exercise. So very important, using light loads, higher volume. We're aiming for around 15 to 20 reps with each exercise. And because we are grouping both exercises together to increase as much blood flow into the target muscle, there's going to be that metabolic stress. And that metabolic stress, that increase in cell volume size will lend itself to an increase in muscle hypertrophy. Well and truly spent. We've torn our deltoids off the bone. Zach, how are you feeling?
Yeah, dead. Yeah, very pumped. But
very pumped. Excellent session actually, high volume, especially with a lot of those lateral raises and rear delt raises. I really enjoyed those. The next priority though, rest, recovery, recuperate and repair. We're going to slam ourselves some isopept. Now some chicken, broccoli and sweet potato fries, and
what are we going to get? We'll get some decent food. We'll get something good.
Sleep has unfortunately deteriorated to a 2 out of 5, and I think I would attribute that to just your mind is racing during a competition prep. You're worrying about the next thing, the next training session that you have to do, the next meal that you have to have. On top of that, managing all your workload. So there's just a variety of things that are coming into play that are affecting all the qualitative factors that can potentially impact my recovery and manipulate my body composition change. So over the forthcoming week, I'm really going to make a conscious effort to get more sleep, to manage my external stresses, and a lot of that comes down to just time management and being able to sort of calm the farm, so to speak, because the last thing I can afford, especially 5.5 weeks out, is for my cortisol levels to be through the roof. This is where the crunch time really does happen, and this is where the most significant amount of body composition change occurs. Just in light of the fact that I want to get ready as early as possible now, this is the point in time that I'm really going to start to feel the pinch. But mentally, I think I'm well and truly prepared for that, and I think that as you draw closer and the horizon of the finish line starts to come closer into view, your motivation levels inevitably get higher, and the level of accountability with your training, your nutrition, and every other facet inherent in the prep goes up. So looking forward to the challenge over the next 5.5 weeks, and hopefully I can bring my best to the stage.